On a rainy afternoon in a busy cafe, Sasha sat at a window table staring out at the bustling street. The raindrops ran down the glass, blurring the world outside. She sipped her coffee, trying to focus on her book, but her mind drifted. Thoughts of her job loomed over her, the stress making it hard to concentrate. She had just wrapped up a long week, and the last thing she wanted was to deal with people. Inside the cafe, the smell of fresh pastries and brewed coffee filled the air, a comforting contrast to the storm outside. Just then the door swung open and a blast of cold wind rushed in, along with a man wearing a long, dark coat. His hair was tousled and he looked every bit as worn as she felt, but as he stepped in he held himself straight, almost regal, despite the rain-soaked appearance. Sasha didn't pay him much mind, merely glancing at him from the corner of her eye as he scanned the cafe for a seat. It was nearly full, with every table occupied. People were laughing and chatting, oblivious to the storm that drummed on the roof. The man's gaze landed on her table and a flicker of hope broke through his tired demeanor. Just then, Sasha's mood shifted. She had enough of people expecting things from her, and she wasn't about to give up her hard-won seat to a stranger. It was only a few minutes later that he approached her table. He smiled gently, but there was a heaviness behind his eyes. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm yet persistent. Sasha looked up, meeting his eyes for a brief moment. Her voice was firm, perhaps too firm. An uneasy tension filled the air. She quickly returned to her book, hoping he would just walk away. Instead, he stood there for a moment longer, waiting. Just for a while then. "I'd really appreciate it," he said, glancing towards the other tables. Something flickered in her gut. It was unusual, the way his presence felt so heavy, as if something was weighing on him beyond the rain. Still, she held her ground. He nodded, understanding, but something deeper stirred in his eyes, a quiet disappointment. Just as he opened his mouth to say something else, a voice from across the room, the voice of a young man, caught Sasha's attention. "Did you hear? That's him." She stiffened, suddenly aware of the murmurs growing louder around her. The man was a figure of respect, known for his impressive reputation and immense success. She had seen his name in the news, but seeing him in person looking so ordinary was surreal. He had just wanted a seat. The whispers echoed in her mind, leaving a bitter taste. Here she was, a woman who just a moment ago had felt the weight of exhaustion pull her down, now staring at someone who had transformed industries, held immense power. And she had denied him a simple seat. A rush of guilt coursed through her. She glanced back at him just as he turned to leave, his shoulders slightly hunched, as if the weight of his title had become a burden at that moment. Why had she acted this way? Was it pride, fear? She called after him, surprising herself with the urgency in her voice. He paused but didn't turn around. "It's fine," he replied softly, the fatigue evident in his tone. "No, please." He hesitated and turned back toward her, eyes searching for sincerity. A knot formed in her stomach, but she nodded, feeling like she had crossed an invisible line. He approached her table, grateful yet bewildered. The moment he sat down, an unspoken tension filled the space between them, something raw and electric, as if they both knew this moment could change everything. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice even quieter now as he settled in. Sasha found herself studying him. "I didn't realize who you were, I mean your title." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Impressive feels like an understatement sometimes." Sasha frowned, taken aback. "Lonely," he raised an eyebrow. "Everything. Money can't replace connection, and power often isolates." She wanted to understand him better. Curious how a simple decision, denying a seat, had led to this exchange, a moment filled with honesty and vulnerability. "I guess I misunderstood," she said. "I thought you were just—" His gaze softened. "We all have our masks." As they talked, the rain continued to patter rhythmically against the cafe's windows. The world outside faded away and the noise within the cafe became a background hum. They exchanged stories about their lives, nothing too deep, just fragments of truth that felt meaningful. He shared how he stepped into the business world, how he fought tooth and nail to build up his company from scratch. Every success came accompanied by sacrifices, isolating him from friends and family. "Sometimes I wonder if it was worth it." Sasha felt a pang of connection, recognizing the struggles she faced at work. Here was a man regarded for his achievements, yet wrestling with doubts and loneliness. "I know that feeling," she confessed. He nodded, his expression serious. "Exactly." By now, the rain had begun to ease outside, and the cafe was filled with laughter and chatter once again. Sasha felt the heaviness of the conversation lifting, and yet it also anchored her deeper in thought. For a moment, it was no longer just about titles and expectations. It was about being human. She asked, genuinely curious. "Try to find moments of authenticity," he replied, his eyes lighting up. "I try to engage with people in real ways, not as a CEO, but as a human. Right now, talking to you." She smiled, feeling as if a bridge had formed between them. The seconds turned into minutes, yet what felt like hours surged with meaning. The conversation flowed easily, almost magically. They spoke of dreams, fears, and the everyday frustrations that weave life together. With every exchanged story, the walls that Sasha had built around herself began to fall. She revealed her aspirations, her struggles at work, and how she sometimes felt overshadowed by expectations. He listened intently, his expression shifting from one of understanding to compassion. You have the fire, he said, his voice earnest. Don't let anyone dim it. Feeling inspired, she dared to ask, so what if you lost everything? He paused, pondering her question. I suppose I'd feel lost at first, but I'd still have the lessons and the experiences. A stillness settled over them. In that packed cafe, surrounded by laughter and boisterous conversations, they shared a quiet truth. As they sifted through their lives, both of them so different, yet so alike, Sasha felt a new strength emerge. Her heart swelled with a dream she thought she had buried somewhere deep inside. I want to create impact, she confessed. He smiled at her, and she knew in that moment he saw her. She was not just a woman refusing a seat, but someone with a spirit that burned bright. Then do it. They exchanged contact information before parting, as if this connection would continue beyond the cafe, a small reminder that two seemingly ordinary people could transform an ordinary day into something extraordinary. As Sasha walked out into the now glistening street, the rain had stopped. The air felt fresh, as if the world had renewed itself, and so had she in a way she never expected. She had initially seen him as just someone needing a place to sit, but now she understood. Titles don't define us, our actions, our genuine connections do. Having refused him a seat had led to something profound. And as she stepped into the vibrant day ahead, she felt ready to embrace the journey waiting for her, armed with the hope that real connections could blossom even in the most unlikely circumstances. It was a chilly afternoon, and the cafe buzzed with a hum of warmth and chatter, but it felt like the cold had seeped into Sasha's bones. She sat at a small table tucked in the corner, surrounded by the smell of fresh coffee and baked goods. Her laptop was open, but her eyes were fixed on the raindrops racing each other down the window. She was caught in her thoughts, the weight of the week pressing on her shoulders. Just then the door swung open, and a gust of cold air rushed in, followed by a tall man with messy hair and a dark coat. He scanned the room, his expression a mix of hope and exhaustion, and Sasha felt a flicker of sympathy. But that sympathy quickly faded as he approached her table. She was deep in her world, and she didn't want to be disturbed. "Excuse me," he started, his voice warm but weary. She barely looked up, her fingers still tapping the keyboard. The words came out sharper than intended, laced with a sudden irritation she couldn't quite place. He paused, his eyes searching hers, a hint of disappointment flickering across his features. "Oh, okay." As he turned to leave, a burst of laughter from the adjacent table thrust her into a moment of clarity. "Wait," she called out, her heart squeezing unexpectedly. He turned back, eyes widening in surprise, and settled into the chair across from her. The space between them seemed charged, filled with an energy that felt palpable. She could sense a storm beneath his calm surface, and it sparked her curiosity. But Sasha wasn't ready to explore that yet. She was still lost in her own world. "Thanks," he said, settling down, visibly more relaxed. Sasha forced a smile, still keeping her attention on her screen. A few moments of silence passed, punctuated only by the clatter of cups and the soft murmur of conversation. But then she noticed his eyes kept drifting toward her laptop. He asked, his voice breaking the silence. She shrugged, just the usual. Another pause, and then he leaned forward slightly. "I get it." His sincerity caught her off guard. She was used to dismissive small talk, yet he didn't seem like he was looking for casual conversation. Wanted to push back to shut him down, but something in his demeanor stopped her. "Yeah, it does," he nodded, a knowing expression crossing his face. "You must be in tech." Sasha raised an eyebrow. "Just a guess. You look like someone who balances a lot of pressure." She felt a rush of unexpected warmth at his observation and found herself softening. "You're right. Interesting," he replied, leaning back. "I've always admired those in tech." Before she could respond, a hush fell over the cafe. She looked up, following the gaze of others in the room, and suddenly realized the man was drawing attention. People whispered, pointing subtly in his direction. One voice said, barely above a whisper. Sasha's heart skipped a beat. This man, sitting casually in front of her, the one she had just refused a seat, was a powerful figure in the business world. The weight of her earlier dismissal crashed over her like a cold wave. Suddenly, every moment felt more severe, tinged with regret. She had thoughtlessly turned down someone clearly in a position of importance. He was more than a person, he was a name and a title in the industry, and she had treated him like any uninvited guest. The man seemed to notice her stunned expression. "I'm sorry if this caught you off guard," he said, his tone gentle yet cautionary. "I didn't know," she muttered, feeling small. "I shouldn't have dismissed you like that." He waved her words away. "It happens, everyone has their own battles. Especially in this line of work," she added, suddenly feeling a kinship with him. "The pressure is insane." He raised an eyebrow, a slight smile creeping onto his face. "Drowning is a strong word, but I get it." For the first time in this conversation, she sensed real connection beneath the layers of their facades. They were two people caught in the relentless struggle of their careers, wrestling with expectations and pressures that never felt far behind. "You don't seem like a typical CEO, you seem approachable," she said, her voice sincere. "I expected you to be more." He chuckled lightly. "I think titles can do that to people. They put up walls, but I try not to let mine define who I am." In that moment, their conversation grew deeper, filled with an openness that felt refreshing. She shared her frustrations about her job, the long hours, the endless meetings, the feeling of being unappreciated. With each word, her defenses crumbled, and it felt good to admit her struggles out loud. He nodded in understanding, sharing his own journey, the sacrifices he made to reach the top. Success has its costs. Sasha couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration for him. Despite his position, here he was, speaking candidly, connecting on a human level amidst the chaos they both faced. She asked quietly, his gaze became distant, as if he was reflecting on memories long buried, all the time, but I also know that the journey shapes us. She felt that deeply. There were moments she wished she could forget, the long nights, the setbacks, the doubts that crept in. Yet those experiences built her into who she was now, a strong woman navigating a challenging world. As their conversation continued, a sense of camaraderie blossomed. They laughed at their shared burdens, at the absurdity of the high-stakes world they were part of. Through small stories and intimate glimpses into their lives, she began to see him not just as a CEO, but as a human being with dreams, fears, and a heartbeat just like hers. But soon, the cafe began to fill the air with the sound of closing time. The laughter and clinking of mugs dwindled, replaced by the weight of silence settling on their table. Sasha felt a mixture of disappointment and gratefulness. This connection had formed in such an unexpected place, and now it felt like it was ending too soon. She found herself asking, the words tumbling out before she thought twice. His eyes lit up, surprise crossing his features. "I'd like that," he said, reaching for his phone. They exchanged numbers, both aware that this moment was rare and precious. "Thank you for today," he added, his voice sincere. "And you reminded me of the value in connection," she replied, the warmth blooming in her chest. As they stood to leave, the door swung open again. A gust of chilly air swept in, and she felt the familiar weight of the outside world press upon her. But this time she felt different, as if something in her had shifted. "Take care," he said softly, a smile lingering on his lips. "You too," she replied, already feeling the doubts of work creeping back in. Walking away from the cafe, Sasha felt the pavement beneath her feet, the chill in the air. But with every step, the doubts that usually clouded her mind seemed to lift. She had walked in, consumed by the pressures of her life, and walked out having forged a genuine connection, something that often felt elusive in the corporate world. She paused for a moment, looking back at the cafe, a simple choice transforming into something far more significant. The rain had stopped and the clouds were parting, revealing patches of blue sky. With her head held a little higher, she realized she would face the next day with renewed vigor, armed with the knowledge that in the midst of titles and expectations, real connections were always possible. Today had shown her that everyone, even a powerful CEO, carry their own battles hidden and unacknowledged. And if she could remember that, perhaps she could find her footing, her sense of purpose and balance amid the chaos. With a smile on her lips, she picked up her pace, ready to face her world anew. She wouldn't forget him or the lessons they shared. Maybe it was just a seat exchanged, but in a way, so much more had changed. In this journey of life, every moment mattered, especially those that remind us of our shared humanity. Sasha sat in her favorite corner of the coffee shop, the smell of fresh pastries lingering in the air like a warm hug. The rain drummed against the window, creating a rhythmic backdrop to her chaotic thoughts. She had found solace here, surrounded by the clatter of cups and soft conversations. But today, that comforting scene felt murky, overshadowed by the storm swirling in her mind. With her laptop open, she stared at a blank document, the cursor blinking, mocking her inability to concentrate. Work had become overwhelming, deadlines loomed like dark clouds, and the pressure pressed down on her chest. She took a sip of her lukewarm coffee, willing herself to focus, but the words wouldn't come. Then the cafe door swung open with a heavy gust of wind, carrying a rush of cold air that cut through the warmth inside. In walked a tall man, water dripping from his dark coat, his hair tousled and wild from the storm outside. For a moment he scanned the room, seemingly searching for a place to rest. Sasha glanced up, her eyes briefly meeting his. There was something in his gaze, hope, weariness, perhaps a mix of both, but just as quickly as she noticed, she returned to her screen, the storm inside her drowning out everything else. She wanted peace, and the last thing she needed was an interruption. He approached her table, hesitating for a moment before speaking. "Excuse me." Without looking up, she waved a hand dismissively. "Yeah, it is," she replied, her tone sharper than she intended. He stood there for a heartbeat longer, surprise flashing in his eyes before they dulled with disappointment. "All right, I understand," he said quietly, turning to walk away. But Sasha's heart twisted with something she couldn't quite place, a fleeting moment of regret. "Wait," she called after him, her voice softer this time. He turned back, visibly surprised yet grateful. "Thank you," he said, settling into the chair across from her. A silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. She could sense the weight he carried, but her mind remained clouded, wrapped in the chaos of her own world. They sat in silence for a few moments, with Sasha stealing glances at the man. He was attractive, even with the weariness etched on his face. He fiddled with a napkin, glancing around the cafe, and for a moment she felt a strange connection, a shared sense of solitude. He asked, his tone curious yet gentle. She sighed without looking up from her laptop, just the usual grind. I get that, he replied, and there was something in the way he said it that made her look up. Everyone's racing against time, right? The pressure to deliver. She met his gaze, intrigued. The tension in her shoulders eased just a little, then suddenly the atmosphere shifted. The din of the cafe quieted, replaced by whispers, some laughter, and glances directed toward their table. Sasha felt a tug of worry. What was going on? Her heart raced as she instinctively looked over her shoulder, half expecting a commotion. A young man's voice floated through the air, barely above a whisper. That's him. Sasha froze, her heart pounding against her ribcage. The realization hit her like a bucket of icy water. The man sitting across from her, the one she had so dismissively pushed away, was a powerful figure in the corporate world. Suddenly, the air between them felt thick with significance, and she could almost taste her initial rudeness. The man noticed her wide eyes and offered a small, knowing smile. Caught off guard, she managed a weak smile back, heat rising to her cheeks. "Bit, it's fine," he said, waving away the moment with casual grace. Titles can be such a strange thing, but the weight of her earlier dismissal loomed larger now. She felt a sting of shame. He hadn't just approached her for a seat, he had sought connection, and she had turned him away based on an assumption. "I'm really sorry for how I reacted," she said, her voice low. "It happens," he replied, leaning back, a hint of kindness in his demeanor. "Everyone has their own struggles." "I guess I was just in my own head," she admitted, her gaze dropping back to the laptop, the blinking cursor suddenly mocking her once more. "This week has been, corporate life can feel heavy," he agreed. His words struck a chord within her. There was a familiarity in their struggles, two people caught in the relentless grind of ambition. It was both comforting and alarming. "Yeah," she said, exhaling. "It's like a never-ending race." He leaned forward slightly, a look of understanding etching deeper lines on his face. "You know, one of the toughest lessons I learned in this industry is that success doesn't always come in the way we expect." Sasha found herself nodding, the conversation unfolding like some uncharted territory. "You're right, I often feel like I'm lost, struggling to keep my head above water." He offered her a reassuring smile that felt genuine. "We're all a bit lost at times, trying to find out how we fit in. Titles don't help with that, they just complicate things." The noise of the cafe receded, leaving just the two of them in a bubble of understanding. Her discomfort melted away, replaced by a vulnerability that felt refreshing. "I didn't think I'd be sharing my week over coffee with the CEO of Everbridge," she joked lightly, attempting to ease the tension. He laughed, and it felt like music spilling into the air. Odd how life brings us these moments. They started to share their stories, moments of success and failure, the blur of ambition and the isolation that often came with it. He described late nights spent fretting over decisions that could make or break his career, and she shared her frustrations about feeling like a cog in a machine, just another name on the payroll. "People think we've got it all together, but it can be so lonely at the top," he confessed, his voice low. A profound silence settled between them as he spoke, their worlds colliding in unexpected ways. Here they were, an ambitious CEO and an overworked developer, finding common ground in the labyrinthine offices where success was often a solitary pursuit. Just then, a wave of laughter erupted from a nearby table, breaking their momentary haze. Sasha blinked, returning to the bustling cafe around her. She knew their time was limited, the clock was ticking, the day pressing on in its relentless march, but there was something about this interaction, something that felt significant and real. She found herself asking, her heart racing slightly. He gave her a surprised look, then nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. "Of course, I'd like that." As he pulled out his phone to exchange numbers, she felt a surge of excitement mixed with apprehension. Could this be the start of something unexpected, friendship, mentorship, or simply a moment that changed everything? They exchanged numbers, and as he typed her name into his contacts, she felt a swell of hope. Their conversation had opened her eyes to the bigger picture, to the shared struggles that knit people together even when the pressures of life pulled them apart. "I hope we can talk again soon," he said as he stood up, preparing to leave. "I'd like that too," she replied, her voice steady, filled with a newfound confidence. "Thanks for the conversation. Sometimes the most unexpected meetings can change our outlook," he said, heading toward the door, looking back at her one last time. With that, he disappeared into the rain-soaked street, leaving her with a sense of anticipation and hope fluttering in her chest. The shift in her state of mind was palpable, as if the sun had broken through the clouds. As she picked up her laptop and prepared to leave, she couldn't help but smile. She had entered the cafe hoping for distraction and had walked out with so much more, an unexpected connection that was grounded in the messy reality of both their lives. Walking back out into the world, Sasha felt lighter, as if she'd shed an invisible weight. The rush of the cafe faded into the background, and for the first time in a long time, she felt invigorated. Tomorrow, she would face her challenges head-on, buoyed by the certainty that she wasn't alone in her struggles. In a world filled with titles and pressure, sometimes all it takes is one brief interaction, a shared moment with a stranger to remind us of our humanity. And underneath it all, it wasn't about who they were in the spotlight. It was about understanding who they were beneath it, and that made all the difference. Sasha sat alone in a packed cafe, her laptop open but her mind wandering. The rain drummed relentlessly against the windows, creating a soothing rhythm competing with the lively chatter that filled the room. She rubbed her temples, hoping to ease the pressure building behind her eyes. Work had been overwhelming lately, and all she craved was a moment of peace. Just then, the cafe door swung open, allowing a gust of chilly air to sweep in, accompanied by a man who looked utterly disheveled. His dark hair was wet from the rain, sticking haphazardly to his forehead. He carried an aura of exhaustion mixed with determination as he scanned the crowded space, searching for a place to sit. For a brief moment, their eyes met. His gaze was steady, almost pleading. But just as quickly, she turned her attention back to her screen, feeling the weight of her own stress push her deeper into her work. She didn't want to interact, she just needed to get through the day. He approached her table, uncertainty flickering across his face. "Excuse me," he began, his voice calm but weary. Sasha barely looked up, too lost in her world. "Yeah, it is," she replied curtly, an edge in her tone that surprised even her. He hesitated, then nodded, clearly disappointed. "All right," he muttered, turning to leave. Her heart tugged in a way she didn't expect, but she quickly brushed aside the feeling. "Wait," she called out, surprising herself. He turned back, a spark of gratitude igniting in his eyes as he took the empty chair across from her. "Thanks," he said, settling in, the tension in his shoulders easing just a bit. As he sat, silence enveloped them, filled only by the sounds of cups clinking and laughter bubbling from other tables. Sasha couldn't help but study him, a handsome guy despite the fatigue etched in the lines of his face. There was something magnetic about him, yet she felt the weight of her own thoughts pulling her back into a cloud of distraction. He asked, breaking the charge in the air. His voice was warm and inviting, but it also seemed to reach into her. She sighed, glancing back at her laptop as if it held the answers. "Just work stuff." He nodded knowingly, his gaze steady. "I do." She felt a flicker of surprise. Most people merely nodded along, but he seemed genuinely interested. "Exactly," she replied, leaning in slightly. Their conversation flowed easily, surprising Sasha. She shared how deadlines loomed over her like a dark cloud, and he listened, his expression shifting from understanding to reflection. "The pressure can be brutal," he said. Just as the discussion unfolded, a wave of laughter erupted from a nearby table, pulling Sasha's attention momentarily. She caught snippets of a hushed conversation drifting through the air. "Did you see? That's him," a voice whispered. The name struck her like a lightning bolt. Her heart raced, and she felt her cheeks heat up. This man in front of her, this unexpected connection, was someone who wielded power in the corporate world. The flicker of surprise turned into a wave of horror as she realized the weight of her earlier dismissal. This man, someone she had so casually brushed off, was far more than she'd ever imagined. Feeling the blush rising to her face, she glanced back at him. He raised an eyebrow, a slight smile tugging at his lips. "It appears so." Sasha felt a rush of embarrassment mixed with curiosity. "I had no idea," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am sorry for how I acted." "It's all right," he replied, his demeanor calming her nerves. "Titles can make people act strange." "Me too," she admitted, feeling a strange kinship brewing between them. "It's a hectic day, and I thought I'd at least get some work done here. But it seems life had other plans," he finished for her, a knowing glint in his eye. Sasha chuckled, and her earlier embarrassment began to fade, replaced by a sense of ease. Exactly. The atmosphere shifted as they began to share stories of their lives, his climb to the top of a corporate ladder, her struggles in the tech world. He spoke of the loneliness that often accompanied success. "People see the title and forget that underneath it all, I'm just a person trying to navigate through chaos." Sasha felt the weight of his words resonate deeply. "I felt that isolation too. It's strange, isn't it?" He nodded, and for a moment, the cafe around them blurred into the background. It felt like they had stepped outside the confines of their busy lives and found a hidden pocket of understanding amidst the noise. He asked suddenly, a playful glint in his eyes that softened the seriousness of his question. She hesitated, feeling the strong wave of vulnerability wash over her. "I guess. I was so focused on myself, on my own stress, that I didn't even consider someone else's needs." His eyes sparkled with kindness. "We all have our moments." As they spoke, the weight of the world lightened. She learned about his challenges, the sacrifices he'd made to rise within his company, how lonely it could be at the top, where every decision felt monumental. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to just be a regular person again," he mused, glancing out the window at the rain-soaked street. "I think everyone feels overwhelmed at times," she replied. He smiled knowingly, and for a moment they both laughed at the absurdity of life, two strangers sharing a fleeting moment of truth. As minutes turned into a comfortable stretch of conversation, she felt her anxiety slip away. It was as if their dialogue was a soothing balm that eased the sharp edges of her day. Here, in a cafe filled with strangers, they had formed a connection, and it felt authentic and real, something she hadn't expected when she first walked in. But the ambience began to shift. The cafe was slowly winding down, the chatter fading as workers wrapped things up for the day. Sasha felt the moment slipping away, like sand through her fingers. She didn't want their talk to end. It had become a breath of fresh air amidst her stagnant routine. She asked suddenly, the urgency in her voice catching him off guard. He looked surprised but pleased. Absolutely. They exchanged numbers, the action feeling significant, a promise of connection amidst the whirlwind of their lives. As he typed in her contact information, Sasha felt a sense of hope swell within her. There was something deeply refreshing about their exchange, a shared struggle and a moment of vulnerability that transcended titles and expectations. "Thank you for today," he said, giving her a warm smile as he rose from his seat. Sasha smiled back, feeling a spark of inspiration. With that, he walked toward the exit, leaving her in a cloud of contemplation and newfound energy. As she sat in the dying light of the cafe, she couldn't help but reflect on how a single moment, one simple refusal, had turned into an enriching encounter. Her phone buzzed, snapping her from her thoughts. It was a text from him. "Thanks for the conversation." Sasha couldn't help but smile, a warmth flooding her chest. She felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted both on her shoulders and in her mind. The stress that had consumed her was still present, but now it felt more manageable, less overwhelming. Walking outside, she was greeted by a crisp breeze as the storm began to lift. The sun peeked through the clouds, casting a soft golden light across the street. The world felt fresh and alive, like everything had changed in a matter of moments. As she made her way home, Sasha thought about the unpredictable nature of life. Sometimes, connections emerge in the most surprising ways, even when we least expect them. It wasn't just about titles or positions. It was about the shared experience of being human, navigating through the complexities of life together, side by side. And she knew from this day forward she would remember the moments that mattered, the conversations that brought light in the midst of dark storms, and the simple act of offering a seat to a stranger could lead to a deeper connection than she ever dreamed possible. Sasha sat at her usual corner table in the bustling cafe, wrapped in a cocoon of warmth while rain drummed outside like an impatient child. She cradled a steaming cup of coffee, the scent rich, dark, and inviting, but inside her mind, a storm raged. Deadlines loomed like dark clouds, pressures crept in from every corner of her job, suffocating her thoughts. Today, more than ever, she just needed a moment to breathe. The cafe was packed, patrons engaged in animated conversations, laughter defying the dreary weather. Sasha knew she should focus on her work. After all, she had come here to escape her cluttered apartment and the tempest of tasks that awaited her there. But with each tick of the clock, her mind felt heavier, drowning in a swirl of emails and unfinished projects. Then the door swung open, letting in a gust of cold air. A man stepped in, shaking droplets from his coat like a dog after a bath. He was tall, with tousled hair and an air of weariness about him, as though he carried not just the rain but a world of worries on his shoulders. His hopeful glance scanned the cafe, searching for a place to sit. For a brief moment their eyes met, and Sasha felt an unusual jolt of connection, an instinctive tug of empathy. But just as quickly she shut it down, her own stress reasserting itself. The last thing she needed was to engage with a stranger. He stepped closer, his eyes fixating on her table. "Excuse me," he asked, hesitating slightly as if weighing his words. With barely a glance, she dismissed him. "Yeah, it is," she said, her tone sharper than she intended. A flicker of disappointment crossed his face, then he nodded and turned away. "All right, thanks," he mumbled, retreating into the crowd. But before he could slip away, a pang of guilt hit Sasha hard. She hadn't even given him a chance. She called, her voice catching him mid-step. He paused, surprised, and a small smile broke through his weariness. "Really?" He took a seat across from her, and for a moment the tension in his shoulders eased. Sasha forced herself to focus on him. "Sorry for being rude," she said, noting the weariness etched in his features. He chuckled softly. "I get it, we've all been there." She felt a strange kinship with him. "I'm in tech," Sasha said, leaning back slightly. "Totally," he replied, nodding knowingly. "I'm in the same boat." Their conversation began to flow, weaving through shared experiences of stress and fatigue. He spoke with an honesty that piqued Sasha's curiosity. "Sometimes I wonder if all this pressure is worth it." Sasha felt the conversation deepen, and she looked into his eyes. There was a softness there, a vulnerability masked behind layers of experience. "I often think that." He was about to reply when a gust of laughter erupted from a nearby table, drawing Sasha's attention. She noticed a group of people staring over, and her heart quickened as she caught snippets of their conversation. "Did you hear? That's him, the CEO of Everbridge," someone whispered, voice barely containing excitement. Time seemed to freeze for Sasha. The casual interaction that had just felt so comfortable now carried an enormous weight. This man, this ordinary man who had just wanted a seat, was the CEO she'd read about in business articles. Suddenly, the air around them crackled with tension and intensity. She felt horrified and embarrassed, like she'd just spilled a drink on a stranger at a fancy dinner. "You're," she stammered, her cheeks flushing with heat. He chuckled, a hint of mischief in his voice. "Well, I suppose that's my title." Sasha felt a mix of indignation and sympathy wash over her. She had dismissed him without knowing who he was, and yet here he was, still so relatable. "I'm sorry for not knowing," she managed to say, her words tumbling out. Don't worry about it, he said, his eyes warm and reassuring. It's easy to forget we're all just people navigating through life. The tension began to ease and she felt a strange sense of relief. She asked, intrigued. He leaned back, searching for the right words. It's complicated, people see the perks, the money, the power, but they don't see the sacrifices. Sasha could hear the sincerity dripping from his words. I never thought of it that way. I guess we're more alike than I realized. Nodded, and there was an understanding in his eyes that felt grounding. Exactly, you don't have to hold a title to feel the weight of responsibility. The conversation swept them away, grounding them in shared experiences. Sasha confessed her feelings of inadequacy at work, how she often felt like an imposter. His eyes sparkled with understanding as she spoke, and it stirred something deep within her. Here was a man who could easily be her boss, but he was sharing reflections from his own struggles. I think we all struggle with this notion that we must constantly prove ourselves, he said, his voice steady. Their words enveloped them in a bubble, transforming the chaotic cafe into a world of their own. As they exchanged stories, the weight of the world outside faded, and for a moment it was just them, a CEO and a weary tech worker finding solace in each other's truths. But the cafe began to transition, lights dimming slightly as the crowd started to thin. Sasha felt a pang of urgency. She didn't want this connection to slip away. She blurted, caught off guard by her own boldness. He looked surprised but pleased. Absolutely. As they exchanged numbers, Sasha realized how meaningful this interaction had been. It wasn't just a passing moment, it felt significant, like finding a lighthouse in a sea of uncertainties. Thank you for this, she said, feeling a mix of positive energy and newfound clarity wash over her. He smiled, and there was a genuine warmth in his expression. As he stood to leave, she felt a strange reluctance to bid farewell. You've reminded me that there's more to life than deadlines and expectations. There's nothing more important, he agreed, pausing at the door. With that, he stepped into the rain, his figure quickly disappearing into the busy street. She watched as he walked away, feeling a bittersweet pang in her heart. Sasha gathered her things, still buzzing with excitement. The conversation had reignited something within her, a sense of purpose that had been buried beneath the weight of routine and obligation. Walking outside, the world felt transformed. The rain had softened into a mist, the air filled with the fresh scent of damp earth. Perhaps it was the magic of the moment, but for the first time in weeks, she felt a surge of clarity. With her mind racing, Sasha realized her earlier frustration was now lifted. She hadn't just met a CEO, she had connected with another human being. Nothing about him felt untouchable, and that realization empowered her. She suddenly saw traces of her day differently. The stressors weren't insurmountable, they were channels for growth. The fleeting conversation had illuminated the pressure she often felt, turning it into an opportunity. As she walked down the street, head slightly held higher, she let the warmth of their exchange guide her thoughts. This isn't just about titles or positions, it's about finding connections that enrich our lives. In her mind echoed his words about the importance of being human. Sasha felt ready to approach her work from a new angle. Instead of being overwhelmed, she would tackle each task with determination grounded in the understanding that there was vulnerability in everyone, even in positions of power. Today had shown her the simple yet profound truth. Moments of connection could emerge from unexpected encounters, and each interaction has the potential to shift perspectives. The rain may have soaked the streets, but it couldn't dampen her spirit. She would remember this day and the man behind the title, a reminder that sometimes refusing a seat can lead to the most illuminating conversations. And as she stepped into the future, she felt excited for what was to come, ready to face the storms of life with a renewed sense of hope. Sasha sat in the crowded cafe, the aroma of coffee mixing with the sweet scent of pastries wafting through the air. Outside, rain fell in sheets, tapping against the windows like an impatient heartbeat. She nestled deeper into her jacket, feeling a mixture of warmth from the cafe and the cold weight of deadlines looming over her. The storm outside mirrored her thoughts, chaotic, relentless, and demanding her attention. She glanced at her laptop where a blank document awaited her. The cursor blinked at her in mockery, and she sighed. Today was not the day for writing. She just needed a break, a moment to breathe. The packed cafe seemed like the perfect distraction. But then the door swung open, letting in a gust of cold air that swept through the room. And walked a tall man, water dripping from his hair and coat, his demeanor somehow both worn and steadfast. He scanned the room with weary eyes, looking for an open seat. Their gazes met briefly, and Sasha felt a flicker of connection, a spark of empathy, but shrugged it off. The last thing she wanted was to chat with a stranger. He approached her table, shifting slightly as he took in the surroundings. "Excuse me," he said, his voice slow and measured. Without a second thought, Sasha replied, her voice short and clipped. His expression faltered for just a moment. Disappointment crossed his face, then he nodded, turning to walk away. A wave of guilt crashed over her. She didn't even look up, and yet she felt something tugging at her heart. Maybe she was tired of feeling isolated. "Wait," she called out, her voice more forceful than intended. His face lit up, a genuine smile breaking through the fatigue. "Really?" He settled into the chair across from her, and for a moment the tension between them melted away. The cafe buzzed with chatter as conversations wove through the air. Sasha forced herself to focus for a moment, studying the man across from her. He looked intelligent, maybe in his 30s, with patient eyes that seemed to carry a weight of experience. She asked, attempting to break the silence. He chuckled softly. "Not usually. I just needed a place to think. This rain makes everything feel." "I know what you mean," she replied, feeling a strange kinship. "Exactly," he said. As they talked, the connection between them grew warmer. She opened up about her work pressures, her frustrations, and the feeling of drowning in deadlines and expectations. He nodded, his gaze never wavering from hers, encouraging her to keep going. "Sometimes it feels like I'm just existing, not living," she admitted. He leaned forward, sincerity shining in his eyes. "It's easy to get lost in the grind, more meaningful." The words hung in the air, and Sasha found herself contemplating what that even meant. Just as she was about to respond, a flurry of laughter erupted from a nearby table, pulling her attention momentarily. A voice whispered, "That's him." Sasha's heart sank, realization crashing over her, flooding her with embarrassment. The man sitting across from her, the one she had almost dismissed, was a figure of power. The very title she disregarded and belittled moments ago now felt monumental. She suddenly felt exposed, like she'd been caught in a lie. "You." She stammered, her cheeks burning with shame. He raised an eyebrow and smiled, not unkindly. "I suppose so, but titles don't really matter to me," she asked, her voice shaking slightly. The contrast between the confidence she had projected and the unease she felt now was jarring. "It can be tough," he admitted, a shadow crossing his face. "People think prestige comes with ease, but truthfully it often feels lonely." Sasha felt a rush of empathy for him, recognizing the truth in his words. The pressure of expectations, whether in a corporate office or a hectic tech environment, could feel suffocating. "I've often thought that success comes with sacrifice," she said quietly, her mind racing. He nodded, a knowing look in his eyes. "You know, I used to think success was about climbing that ladder, making more connections." At that moment, it felt like the walls around them faded away. They were two professionals, stripped of their titles and expectations, sharing a moment of genuine vulnerability. "But quite the perspective shift," she remarked, genuinely curious. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, but there was a lightness in him now. "Just life, I guess. I lost some close friends along the way." Sasha felt her heart ache for the man in front of her. It was astonishing how much they could share in this brief encounter. She sensed he might be a mentor in ways she hadn't expected, a guide shining a light on the path ahead. "It's surprisingly comforting to hear you say that," she admitted. "I think everyone feels that way at times," he said, his expression softening. "It's easy to get trapped in the hustle." The warmth of their conversation wrapped around them like a blanket. She felt a rush of gratitude for the serendipity of their meeting. This moment had shifted something within her, awakening a spark of clarity. But just as they were immersed in each other's stories, the cafe began to wind down. The staff was cleaning tables, and the hustle of the crowd began to dissipate. Sasha felt a pang of urgency. She asked suddenly, as if grasping at the fleeting moment. "Evan," he replied, smiling warmly. "Sasha," she said, the name spilling easily from her lips. "I would love to keep in touch," he said, as if reading her mind. "Absolutely," she agreed, feeling a rush of hope mixed with exhilaration as they swapped phone numbers. As he typed her name into his phone, she felt the energy between them shift yet again. This encounter had blossomed into something more profound than either of them could have anticipated. Whatever uncertainties awaited her in the world of tech seemed a little less daunting now. They shared a few more laughs before Evan finally stood up, preparing to leave. "Take care, Sasha. I hope we chat again soon," he said, his eyes reflecting that warmth she had come to cherish. "You too, Evan," she replied, watching him turn toward the door. It felt strange to know that someone with so much power had been so down to earth, someone whose wisdom resonated deeply within her. As he stepped into the rain, Sasha gathered her belongings and took a deep breath, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. The storm outside had softened, the clouds parting just enough for slivers of sunlight to peek through. She couldn't shake the feeling that this moment had changed her, awakened something vital within her spirit. Walking back home, she reflected on her life, her choices, and her ambitions. This meeting had given her clarity. More than titles and the unrelenting pressure of the corporate world, it was human connection that mattered most, understanding one another's struggles and aspirations. She thought about Evan and the courage it took to be vulnerable, to articulate his own battles. Perhaps it was a reminder for her to embrace her challenges with the same openness, to allow herself to step back and seek out the moments that brought genuine joy and satisfaction. By the time she reached her apartment, the sun had broken free from the clouds, casting a warm glow across her living room. She stopped for a moment, taking it all in, the beauty outside, the calmness within. It felt like a new beginning was unfurling before her. With renewed purpose swirling in her chest, she opened her laptop, ready to tackle her tasks. But this time, she would approach everything differently. She would prioritize connection, look for meaning in every encounter, and allow herself to enjoy the journey rather than just the destination. Sasha realized that her conversation with Evan had opened a door, one that led beyond the pressures and expectations of her job. It reminded her that everyone hides struggles behind their roles, that titles only obscure the humanity beneath. As she began to type, she felt a spark igniting a desire to share her own stories, her thoughts on the world around her, and the lessons she learned from unexpected encounters. She would write not just for a paycheck, but to connect with others, to inspire honesty amidst chaos. In that moment, she understood that the storm inside her had calmed. She could face the world not as someone consumed by fear or frustration, but as a woman ready to embrace the uncertainties of life with open arms. Each moment mattered, each connection significant, and she would carry that lesson with her always. Today had shown her that life's simplest interactions could lead to powerful transformations. A refusal for a seat had turned into an opportunity for understanding, connection, and inspiration, and that, she knew, was priceless. Sasha looked out the rain-soaked window of her favorite cafe, her thoughts tangled in a web of deadlines and to-do lists. The rhythmic tapping of raindrops created a soothing backdrop, but it couldn't drown out the chaos in her mind. She sipped her lukewarm coffee, scanning the bustling room, trying to find focus amidst the noise. The cafe was crowded, filled with people huddled over steaming mugs, laptops open, and conversations flowing. It was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place to spark creativity, but today it felt stifling. The rain drummed incessantly outside, creating an atmosphere that matched the turmoil inside her head. Then the door swung open, a gust of chilly air cutting through the warmth, and walked a tall man, water dripping from his coat, his hair tousled as if he'd just come in from a storm. His eyes scanned the room, wild yet weary, a flicker of hope mixed with uncertainty. Sasha caught his gaze for a fleeting second, something in his expression pulling at her. "Excuse me," he said, his voice cutting through the cafe noise as he approached her table. Sasha hesitated, glancing at the full cafe. She felt the urge to turn him away, something in her wanted to protect her solitude. "Yeah, it is," she replied, her tone sharper than she intended. His face fell, disappointment clouding his features as he nodded and started to retreat, but just as he turned, a rush of guilt washed over her. "Wait," she blurted out, surprising herself. He hesitated, looking back at her, a spark of hope returning. "Really?" He settled into the chair across from her, an unfamiliar tension settling between them. As they sat in the cafe, filled with the hum of chatter and clinking cups, Sasha stole a glance at him. He seemed weary, but there was an undeniable strength in his posture. Against her better judgment, she felt a flicker of curiosity about the man with the kind eyes. She asked, trying to fill the awkward silence. "Just escaping the storm," he replied, a hint of a smile breaking through the fatigue. "Sasha," she said, a little surprised by how easily her name flowed from her lips. This simple exchange transformed the atmosphere around them. The rain pounded harder outside, yet inside, a warm connection began to weave itself. Ryan leaned forward, his expression earnest. With a sigh, she leaned back in her chair. "I work in marketing." She felt an urge to share her frustrations, to peel back layers of her daily grind. "Sometimes it feels like I'm just a cog in the machine, you know." Ryan nodded, his expression reflecting deep understanding. "I get that. It's easy to feel lost when you're caught in the daily grind." She was surprised. Just as she opened her mouth to respond, another voice from a nearby table cut through the air. "Did you hear that?" Sasha's breath caught in her throat. The realization hit her like a bolt of lightning. This man, this person she had just treated so casually, was part of the upper echelon of the business world. A flurry of shame washed over her. "Oh," she faltered, glancing at him wide-eyed. "It's fine," he said, his demeanor still relaxed, almost apologetic. "I prefer people not to know about titles." Sasha felt a wave of admiration rush through her. "I can understand that." In that moment, their conversation shifted gears. Ryan shared how he navigated the corporate world, how the pressure to perform never really faded. "Sometimes I think the weight of a title can be heavier than the responsibilities themselves," he said. Sasha reflected on his words, feeling the recognition swell in her chest. "I sometimes feel I'm expected to do so much more than I can handle," she confessed. "The pressure is suffocating." With a gentle smile, he nodded. "Everyone carries their own burdens." As the rain persisted outside, their conversation deepened. They swapped stories of their careers, each word laced with sincerity and vulnerability. Sasha found herself captivated, hanging onto his insights as if they were lifebuoys thrown in her chaotic sea of thoughts. "I've learned something important in my journey," Ryan said thoughtfully. "Success isn't about accolades or recognition." Sasha's heart quickened. She could feel the truth in his words. "Absolutely," he replied, his gaze steady. "The more I cling to titles, the more I lose sight of the human experience." Suddenly, the noise of the cafe faded into the background, leaving just the two of them in a bubble of understanding. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, and it melted away any remaining self-doubt. "You make it sound so effortless," she said, a hint of admiration in her voice. He replied softly. As the cafe darkened outside under the relentless rain, Sasha felt lighter. This connection, this moment had cracked open something inside her. The fears and frustrations that had weighed her down were slowly losing their grip. she ventured, her heart racing. Of course, he replied, a spark of curiosity lighting up his eyes. If you had the chance, would you step away from your title? A contemplative look passed over his face. You know, I think I would. Sasha absorbed his words, feeling the layers of his vulnerability peel back. It's wild how titles can overshadow the real person, isn't it? Then let's promise each other, he said, a serious tone creeping into his voice, that we'll find ways to be more real, more authentic, even if it's just in our conversations. Sasha felt a rush of agreement flood her heart. I promise. She caught a glimpse of the clock, realizing the cafe was slowly emptying, the daylight fading. She felt a pang of disappointment. This connection felt important, and yet it was drawing to a close. She blurted out, her voice imbued with urgency. A smile broke on his face. Absolutely. They exchanged numbers, each moment tinged with a hint of promise. As they connected digitally, Sasha felt a warmth in her chest. Something intangible was sparking between them, something that transcended their titles, their struggles. Thank you for today, she said softly, for a moment caught up in the authenticity of it all. Me too, he replied, genuine appreciation dancing in his eyes. Let's make this a habit, okay? As he stood to leave, there was an air of finality, but also a sense of new beginnings. Take care, Sasha, he said, his voice sincere. You too, Ryan, she replied, feeling emboldened. With that, he turned and stepped outside into the rain-soaked street, his figure disappearing into the murky world beyond the cafe. Sasha watched him go, understanding that something significant had shifted within her during their brief encounter. This wasn't just another day, it was a reminder of what it meant to connect authentically. Gathering her belongings, she stepped outside, the crisp air filling her lungs. The city felt alive, invigorated by the rain. For the first time in weeks, she felt liberated, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. As she walked home, Sasha mulled over their conversation, replaying moments of honesty and vulnerability in her mind. She realized she had forged a connection, one that transcended titles, one that made the chaos of her life feel more manageable. What if everyone carried those struggles beneath their surfaces? What if everyone secretly yearned for deep connections, just as she did? This thought ignited a fire within her. She felt ready to approach her life differently. When Sasha finally reached her apartment, she opened her laptop, her heart racing with newfound energy. She felt the urge to explore ideas, to share her thoughts, her experiences. This wasn't about fading into the background, it was about stepping forward and embracing her truth. She wanted to write not just to fill quotas, but to connect. She could share her struggles, her moments of doubt, and invite others to do the same. And as she sat there, fingers hovering over the keyboard, she felt a sense of purpose blossom within her. The pressure of deadlines still loomed, but now it felt more manageable. Each task was an opportunity, a canvas upon which she could blend her thoughts and emotions into something meaningful. Through that cafe encounter, she realized that humanity thrived on connection. Life wasn't merely about titles or achievements, it was about the rawness of shared experiences. And that moment with Ryan, initially shrouded in awkwardness and fear, had revealed a vital truth. From that day forward, Sasha would embrace her journey, approach challenges with authenticity, and seek real connections with those around her. The storm might have clouded her path for a while, but in the midst of it, she found clarity. And with that newfound perspective guiding her forward, she knew that she was ready to take on whatever the world threw her way. The cafe buzzed with life, a warm haven amid the drumming rain outside. Sasha sat at her small corner table, fingers anxiously tapping on her laptop, the blank screen mocking her with every blink. She had come here to escape, to clear her head, but every word felt stuck somewhere deep inside her. The pressure of work loomed large, a constant weight on her chest. Just as she took a sip of her lukewarm coffee, the door swung open. A gust of cold wind rushed in, momentarily disrupting the cozy atmosphere and sending a shiver down her spine. In walked a tall man, wet from the rain, his coat clinging to his frame. He stood in the doorway for a moment, scanning the room like a lost traveler in search of shelter. Their eyes met briefly, and for an instant, Sasha felt an inexplicable connection. His expression, a mix of fatigue and hope, tugged at her heartstrings. But the moment passed quickly as he moved deeper into the cafe, his shoulders slightly hunched. He noticed empty tables, but realized they were all claimed by other patrons, leaving the cafe filled to near capacity. He approached her table, hesitating for just a moment. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low yet firm. For reasons she couldn't fully understand, an iciness crept into her chest. Maybe it was the anxiety from her work pressing down on her, or the fact that she didn't want to engage with anyone. "Yeah, it is," she replied, the words coming out sharper than intended. His face fell, a flicker of disappointment dancing in his eyes. "Oh, okay," he said quietly, turning to walk away. "Wait," Sasha called after him, guilt creeping into her voice. He looked back, surprise spreading across his features, and then approached her again. As he settled into the chair across from her, her heart raced a little. The distance that had separated them moments ago began to shrink as the cafe filled with the soothing sounds of coffee being brewed and soft laughter around them. Something about his presence sparked a faint light in her, and she found herself wanting to know more. she asked, her curiosity piqued. He chuckled softly, running a hand through his hair. You could say that, I get that, she replied, taking a sip of her drink. He said, his eyes glimmering with understanding. As they talked, a natural rhythm emerged. Sasha found herself sharing the weight of her frustrations, endless deadlines, workplace politics, and the struggle to find meaning in her work. She felt lighter, the burdens of her day easing as she opened up to the stranger. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in it all, she admitted, her voice quiet. I think we all feel that way sometimes, he said, leaning closer as if to draw her into his world. Just then a loud burst of laughter erupted from a nearby table, and she turned her head to see a group of people pointing in their direction, whispering excitedly. Someone exclaimed. The name hit her like a punch to the gut. This man, the one she had just casually shared her frustrations with, was someone whose name held weight in the business world. A brief wave of embarrassment coursed through her. He had dismissed him and just moments before had poured out her soul to a man with the kind of title that could shift fortunes. She stammered, suddenly feeling small. Yeah, that's me, he replied with a kind smile, but let's not focus on titles right now. But the realization weighed heavily on her. How could she have been so dismissive? The walls she had built around herself in this cafe fell away, and she felt exposed. The truth was sitting there between them, wrapped in the sincerity of their conversation. I didn't mean to treat you like, he waved his hand dismissively. You're fine, I actually prefer it when people don't know who I am. Sasha felt a rush of gratitude at his understanding. Still, I'm sorry, she replied, searching for the right words. I understand, he said with genuine empathy. The pressure is real, no matter where you are in life, it can become all-consuming. Their discussion unfolded deeper, threading through their shared experiences of pressure, ambitions, and sacrifices. With each word, she felt the weight of her worries beginning to lift. Jason was more than just a title. He was a person, a human being carrying the same struggles that many others faced. She asked, genuinely curious. His gaze softened at her question. It can be incredibly isolating. Sasha nodded, feeling that truth reverberate within her. He met her gaze, a sudden intensity igniting between them. As the rain continued to drum steadily against the window, the conversation deepened, turning into a safe space where vulnerability thrived. There was an authenticity in the way they connected, a stark contrast to the corporate facades that often clouded their lives. In the midst of their discussion, a wave of realization struck Sasha. Here she was, sharing her life's frustrations with a powerful CEO, a chance encounter that might change everything. You know, I sometimes find it hard to balance the demands of work with my personal life, she said, her throat tightening. His expression shifted to one of understanding. That's the struggle, isn't it? I wish I could find a way to approach my work differently, she confessed. Jason leaned back in his chair, contemplating. Finding that balance takes time. It requires being honest with yourself and those around you. As the rain poured heavier outside, Sasha found her own thoughts shifting gears. Here was someone whose path had taken him to levels of success that so many aspired to, yet he felt just as lost at times. The conversation felt refreshing, like a warm blanket on a cold day, yet she couldn't shake the overwhelming urge to dig deeper. She asked, genuinely curious. I find solace in small things, he said. Nature is a great escape for me. It reminds me of the beauty beyond the hustle. Sasha felt a flicker of hope with every moment they shared. That makes sense. Just then, a loud crash interrupted their moment. A tray filled with dishes clattered to the floor. The sound reverberated, echoing through the cafe, startling them both. Heads turned and the bustling chatter faded for a brief instant. Sasha looked over to see a server kneeling to pick up the mess, embarrassment flooding her cheeks. The cafe's energy shifted, fragments of conversations picking back up as laughter broke the tension. Anyway, Jason said, breaking her distraction. True, she agreed, feeling even more inspired by their exchange. As she spoke, something shifted within her. Their conversation had become more than a moment of sharing. It felt like a mission, a calling to live authentically amid expectations. The cafe was now quieter, the rain still pouring heavily outside, filling the world around them with a soft, rhythmic melody. Every second felt more significant, pressing down on them like the damp fog surrounding the streets. Let's make a deal, Jason said suddenly, leaning forward. Let's reach out to each other and check in. Sasha's heart soared at his suggestion, feeling the sincerity of his words wash over her. Their phones buzzed as they exchanged numbers, both of them feeling the electric possibilities of their growing friendship. Just as the moment felt solid, a loud voice rang out from the entrance a group of people had just walked in. Sasha turned to see a crowd of familiar faces, colleagues from her office. Her heart raced as she instinctively pulled back, sinking into her chair. Oh no, she murmured, panic rising in her chest. Jason shifted slightly, catching her reaction. Those are my coworkers. I didn't expect to see them here, she whispered, her voice tight with anxiety. Breathe, Sasha, he said, his tone calm. But the group was making their way toward her, undoubtedly headed her direction. Suddenly, she felt exposed, as if stripped bare before the world. Would they see her as weak? Would they realize she had just opened up to someone they revered? Her heart pounded in her chest, and she stole a quick glance at Jason. He seemed unfazed, a steadfast presence amidst her turmoil, but as her colleagues approached, she knew she had to act fast. "I can't let them see me like this," she whispered urgently. "Just be yourself," he encouraged, barely above a whisper. The group was just steps away. Sasha's mind raced with thoughts, her chest tightening as they drew nearer, then her heart sank deeper. "They'll find out," she breathed. She could already hear the whispers, the judgment. Jason leaned in, his presence steady beside her. "This is your moment to choose how you respond." As their colleagues arrived, Sasha felt torn between the comfort of the connection she had just built and the judgment she feared from others. The atmosphere crackled with tension, and she had to decide, would she hide or stand tall? And just then, as the group stepped into her line of sight, she heard a voice say, "Wow, I didn't expect to see you here, Sasha." The moment hung in the air, suspended in time, the weight of her uncertainty clashing against the certainty of the truth she had just begun to uncover. Every eye turned to her, and in that heartbeat, she realized that how she chose to respond could change everything. Would she embrace the vulnerability she had just discovered or slip back into her shell amid the judgment? As she opened her mouth to speak, the world stood still. Time seemed to hang, tension building, as she prepared to face the moment that could either free her or pull her under.